I think I have an issue with that mindset. It does not only to touch the Quran or not.
Again, it goes back to forms. If all we understand are forms, then
Yeah,
we don't have the ability to interact with people except through rigidity
exactly.
and sort of do and don't, black and white.
Mm.
It goes back to education. Like we don't, most Muslims don't even understand what others actually believe.
Yeah,
We
that's
have no understanding of their source text, the historical analysis of these source texts, the evolution of their own belief systems, religions. We have to first understand Islam, but
yeah.
that also requires understanding Islam in the context of history, which means okay, it's we don't just live in a vacuum,
Mhm.
right? There's all these other traditions, religions, and it's helpful for us to know something about them.
Some.
In my opinion, and in my experience,
Mhm.
it's valuable and helpful to have some level of education and learning when it comes to these things specifically. So for me, one of the things that ignited my passion for religion and faith and spirituality was actually reading these source scriptures themselves.
Mm.
We were required, I had to read the Old Testament, which is the first, or the, not even the Old Testament, but the first five books, what is
Yeah,
considered the Torah, right?
yeah.
Of the Old
Five books. Yeah.
Testament.
Hmm.
We were required to read the Gospels of Jesus.
Mm.
And as I'm reading these things, I actually became amazed because and then I read the Quran. It's like the
Mm.
Quran perfectly puts it all together. It
Mm.
clarifies
All the
all of the confusion in all of these sources. It answers a lot of the questions in them,
true.
and it also unites everything, right? But I wouldn't have as much of an understanding. It would just be, oh, they're the Christians. They believe,
Mm.
just a very minimal amount of understanding of what they believe or what they
True.
don't believe. But the more that we know, the more that we can learn, the better. It helps us uh, even understand Islam better and
Mm.
appreciate Islam even better and more.
So, how do you teach your children? If you would like to share something, like, are you having challenges in teaching your children about Islam while living in the West, or is it simpler, easier, difficult? If I, would you mind my asking how old they are, like what ranges, or you can give the range, or if it is
Yeah,
comfortable for you.
my no problem. My kids at this point are between 16 and 24 or 17 and 24.
Okay.
So, they're a bit older now.
Hmm.
The way that we can teach our children is the way that the Prophet ﷺ taught his companions. This is the most powerful, most effective, and really the only way to truly teach anybody anything. And that is through what is in Arabic known as sohba, companionship or association. So this is how the Prophet ﷺ taught his companions. He didn't have like a set time every day where he's going to give a lecture and we're going to talk
Mm.
about this topic and this subject, but he lived with them. He
Mm.
ate with them. He fought with them. He worked
Yeah.
with them. He built with them. He gardened with them and planted with them. And in the context of all of that, teaching takes place. This is how my teachers taught. It wasn't formal, it wasn't academic, it was just through companionship, through
So true.
association. And that's the most effective way to teach. So you just have to live your life.
Yeah.
And there are infinite opportunities within that to teach, right? Through example and also through language and
True.
information. But a large part of it comes through just living, just
True.
living the way, being the religion.
So true. Any suggestions or tips for the parents, for the youth?
Yeah, first, well, for the parents, first and foremost, work on yourselves and then work on your children. But first, you have to work on yourselves.
And for the youth?
Seek, seek answers, seek truth.
Mm.
If you don't seek truth, your heart will die and you'll slip into darkness and depression and aimlessness and purposelessness. So seek truth and don't be afraid. Truth is wanting to be found.
Just how would you, when I say God consciousness, is that clear, or should I say,
So there's two ways that we can look at this.
yeah?
When we say God consciousness,
Hmm.
these are almost two aspects of the thing. When we say God consciousness, typically the term that we're referring to is taqwa, right? To be conscious of
Yeah.
God, mindful of God.
Mhm.
So that's one aspect of the of
Yeah.
the, and in fact, that's the first part of it, right? And so what I would say is by being God conscious, it will lead us to real consciousness.
Mm.
So in the West, in the modern parlance, when people say the word consciousness, right? It's a popular word, popular idea nowadays, awareness, consciousness.
Awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're beginning to realize, right, that this is really the foundation of creation, of existence, right, of the universe. It's right, it's about consciousness. And this is, of course, to this day, they can't figure out, there's no way for them to identify where consciousness comes from. It doesn't come from, it's not the product of just chemicals. There's something deeper.
Yep.
So consciousness is God. God is the one that is conscious. He is the all-seeing and the all-hearing, the all-aware. Right? Consciousness is the result of the attributes of God. And so by being God conscious, we become increasingly conscious, real consciousness, right? Because at best, any consciousness that we have is given to us by God.
Mm.
So the process of evolution of the human being, the human soul, is a process of increasing in consciousness, in awareness. But the path to doing that is through and with and by God, Allah, Almighty Subhanahu wa Ta'ala.
So, what is wealth in your experience?
Well, I would say wealth, first and foremost, is is internal, and it's faith. Like the greatest wealth is Iman. There's nothing greater than that. And so any type of material wealth is not worth sacrificing one's Iman for. Allah says when He looks at the world, it's not even worth the weight of the wing of a mosquito in Allah's sight, the material world. So the greatest wealth, first and foremost, is Iman. And then, all of the gifts of God, right? Our health, our bodies, our families, our relationships. These are truly valuable. These are the things that actually matter. And it's tragic and it's sad that human beings, we end up sacrificing all of these things in the pursuit of money because we live in a materialist society and a materialist modern culture. Material wealth is really kind of the least uh, actual valuable wealth, but it's a necessity. We have to deal with that too.
Sure. Yes.
So that's the thing. It's about developing the tools to manage the very normal and real human experiences and emotions that we all have.
Mhm.
And so, and the truth is, right, because these are also conditioned behaviors and responses. So if I'm a very angry person
Mhm.
and I get angry a lot and I don't do anything about that, that'll just become my norm.
Mhm.
But if I start holding myself in check, not letting it get too far, learning how to deal with it, and continuing on that spiritual path of self-development, over time, right, the experiences of anger become less and less, and it becomes less pronounced as well. It becomes less dramatic. So over time, like any type of exercise, you get better and more capable and more competent. Your capacity increases over time. So, I mean, of course, I'll still have, challenging and frustrating experiences in life or situations, but it's not like the way that they end up. First of all, they're far less than those types of experiences are far because you just learn to let go. You
Mm.
learn to surrender
That's what I
much
was
more
coming
so.
to. Like, how do you manage? And it's good to come
Yeah,
from you so we can learn about it. Like,
you
how to
just
manage it?
right, and so you learn to just over time and over years, you learn. I'm tired of suffering, and just you just start to learn to let go more and more
Yeah.
of things. You learn to surrender more and more, and that's ultimately what it comes down to is surrender.
Yeah.
And so you learn to surrender more and more, and even when there is something that really is a problem or an issue, again, it's not like it was maybe 20 or 30 years ago for me, right? Typically, it's not like that.
Yeah.
I can be much more calm, much more reserved, much more stoic, and the solutions are all there.
Yeah.
It's just about being able to practice them.
Mm.
So instead of immediately reacting, for example, you train yourself to breathe
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
calm yourself first, relax first. And so the beauty is that these emotions, these gifts, right? as Rumi says, they're messengers from beyond. They're all actually, in fact, gifts. When something happens and it triggers us, that's not just a negative thing, because that energy then can be transmuted,
Mm.
right? And that's its purpose if
Mm.
we make the right choices.
Yep.
If I get triggered, if I get upset, if I get hurt, if I get afraid, if I get angry, I can act or react unconsciously to that experience, or I can slow down, breathe, turn towards God, and then that energy becomes fuel for the ascent towards Allah. It becomes a means of healing us and purifying us, as well as other human beings, by the way.
Mm. Yeah. Changes the behavior in front of you, the
It
person in
does it,
front of you.
and
Yeah.
it also it makes our faith real. So going back to where we started, it's what makes Iman real.
Mm.
Because the pinnacle of Iman, right? When we talked about Islam, then there's Iman, and the Prophet ﷺ described Iman, and it's to believe in Allah and to believe in the angels and in the holy books and in the prophets and in the day of judgment and in destiny.
Yep.
Al-Qadr.
Yep.
Khairihi wa sharihi. The good and the bad is from Allah. So ultimately, whatever happens in my life, the more that I can surrender to it in the moment, because I understand it is the will of God, my faith expands, my faith grows, my Iman becomes more real, until that just becomes increasingly our dominant or predominant way of being, our state. And then everything becomes fuel.
Mm.
The hardships of the world, the tragedies of the world, the disappointments, the frustrations, when we learn that we can
Especially
just turn.
nowadays. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? And we learn that we have there's no rest anywhere in this world except in the presence of God.
Mm.
And we turn towards Allah in those moments. We first calibrate ourselves. We first reconnect with our source, the
Mm.
source of power, the source of peace. First, we've got to deal with ourselves, and then we can deal with the circumstances or the issues or the problems.
Mm.
You can't do that without first dealing with the inside. If you do, it's like hitting your head against the wall.
True.
It'll never change, and you'll just be stuck in frustration. And Allah says, I will not change your condition until you first change what is inside of yourself. And we have to look at all of this again as, what is the lesson for us?
Mm.
Why is this happening?
Mm.
And before we can blame others and be victims, we have to first look at ourselves.
Yep.
And correct ourselves, and then deal with the external issues and problems.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Yep. So what is the value of gratitude in your life?